Very good morning to everybody. So this morning we have the opportunity to spend maybe 1 hour or so to learn about the teachings of the Buddha. So I think it's very important. We should check our mind, especially our motivation, our intention, why we are here, and how best we can benefit from listening to the Buddha Dhamma by reflecting and remembering what is called the 4 Reliances. Okay, so I just flash you the 4 Reliances. So let us remember that. So when we listen to a Dhamma talks, or we rely not on the person, but on the words that we hear. Likewise, we rely not just on the words that we hear, but we also rely on the meaning of what we have heard. And thirdly, we rely not just on the provisional meaning, but on the definitive meaning of what we have heard. And finally, what is most important, we rely not just the intellectual understanding of what we have heard, but how we are able to put into practice what we have heard so that it become a non-conceptual experience of the Buddha's teachings in our everyday life. Okay, so I think those 4 reliances are very important for us to remember each time when we listen to a Dhamma talk. Okay, so of course this is taken from the Abhisamaya Alankara, ornament of clear realization. So it's a very important text. So this morning, so we will continue our discussion on the shorter discourse on the full moon night, which is the Cula-punnama Sutta. Right? And I think if you have been following the series, you would recall in the first 2 sessions, I think Brother Nanda spoke to you about the 7 qualities of who is sappurisa. And you must have remembered, for example, a sappurisa is someone who has got sattva, who has got faith, confidence, who knows the difference, who knows about the importance of shame in doing wrong, the fear of doing wrong, the importance of being learned, of being energetic, effort, and being mindful, and then cultivate wisdom. Okay? And then I think Sister Shanti also spoke to you about the importance of intention, isn't it? About whatever, that sappurisa, whatever he does, he is very clear about the intention so that it doesn't harm himself, it does not harm others, it does not harm oneself and others. So those are very important qualities of what a sappurisa is. And I'm sure you also remember that the definition of a sappurisa is, of course, is when you have a literal translation, it becomes a true person. So it's sappurisa. Sat has come from the word satcha. You know, this word satcha, which means the Four Noble Truth, the truth. So it's a true person, but it has always been translated as easier for us to understand as someone who's a good person, someone who is noble, someone who is worthy of respect. And 2 days from today, as Sister Aili mentioned, or 3 days, right? On August 31st, we will be celebrating the 15th death anniversary of our late K3 Dhammananda. So he's what I would call an exemplar of a true sappurisa, right? Someone who has really, who spent more than 50 years of his life, dedicating, teaching, sharing, and showing by example what a true sappurisa is all about. Okay, so I think those of us who have been associating with the late Chief Reverend knows what I mean. And even if you have not associated with him, just by reading his many writings or listening to his many videos that are now easily available on the internet, you will know what kind of a sappurisa, right? When we're talking of the late K3 Dhammananda. So I think it's a good time for us to reflect on what a great person he has been. And in fact, many of us, including myself, if not for him, I wouldn't be able to today, this morning, to share with you the wonderful Dhamma, right? So thanks to him, and so we are always very grateful, right, for his kindness, his compassion, and of course his wisdom. Okay, so today we are going to continue talking about what is called the sappurisa, and this is another part of the discourse. So I'm just going to continue here. It says, and how does a bad person, of course, the word bad person is asappurisa, right? You remember last week we talked about that. So when you put the prefix a in front, it becomes negative, right? Just like the word vijja is knowledge, right? You put the word a in front, avijja, that becomes ignorance, right? Kusala is good action, kusala karma. So you put an A in front, akusala, right? That means akusala. Like in Malay, it's akusala salah. So you're really done the wrong thing. Okay, so the prefix A actually means something bad, something negative. So how does a bad person act as a bad person? Here, a bad person kills living beings, takes what is not given, and misconducts himself in sensual pleasures. Now, sometimes the word is translated as sexual misconduct or misconducts himself in sensual pleasure. So sometimes in the words kami sumi chachara is translated as sexual misconduct or sensual misconduct. Right? So that is how a bad person acts as a bad person. And then as usual, if you look at the Buddhist suttas, they always talk about what is negative and then what is positive. So here then, likewise in the Cula-punnama Sutta, Buddha also explains further and how does a good person act as a good person. Here, a good person, in others, the sappurisa. He abstains from killing living beings, from taking what is not given, and from misconduct in sensual pleasures. So that is how a good person acts as a good person. Now, I'm sure you would know by now that these three aspects of what is mentioned as sappurisa is also what you have just recited this morning, right? The 5 precepts. So it forms part of the 5 precepts. Last week, we spoke about right speech, or we spoke about speech, right? Which is the 4th of the 5 precepts. Yeah. So today we look at the other 3 aspects. Now, I think what is important, as I would like to emphasize again and again, is that even when we look at the 5 precepts or we look at whatever we do, we must always look at it in the context of the Noble Eightfold Path, right? Because they are all interrelated. So I just have one paragraph here extracted. Here it says, and how is right view the forerunner? In other words, before anything else, we must have right view. Isn't that the beginning, or isn't that the pinnacle of the Noble Eightfold Path? You have right view and right thoughts, right? Samma ditthi and samma sankappa. And so how is right view the forerunner? Here, one discerns wrong action as wrong action and right action as right action. So this is one's right view. And what is wrong action? Killing, taking what is not given, sensual misconduct. This is wrong action. One tries to abandon wrong action and enter into right action. Okay? So then this is just an extract, right? So I'm not going to go to the full part of the thing. So this is one's right effort. So what is important is, you find that here it says, one is mindful to abandon wrong action and to enter and remain in right action. This is one's right mindfulness. Therefore, these 3 qualities, right view, right effort, and right mindfulness, they run and circle around right action. So when we talk about right action, or even when this morning we observe the precepts about action, that is only one aspect of the Noble Eightfold Path. Later I will try to explain. It basically tells you what not to do. All right. So what is that we should do? So that's a very important part. Yeah. But before we can even say, yeah, we are observing the precepts, we're doing the right thing, we need to understand if we are observing the 5 precepts based on right understanding, or are we not? So I think that's a very important. Yeah. So here it says, when you have right action, your right action must first of all be based on right view, and then of course you must have effort. If you don't make effort, you're not going to be able to observe the precepts. And how you observe the precept, mindfulness is very important. And here we're talking about right mindfulness, right? I think many of you would be familiar with how the word mindfulness is today so well known that you have mindfulness practically for everything, right? From how to be a successful stockbroker, mindful trading, to even mindful eating, which is not bad, and mindful business, and even mindful sniping. How you can be a good sniper, so that you can shoot and kill someone with precision, right? So that is that is how the word mindfulness has been distorted in such an extent that it's no longer right mindfulness. Yeah. So right mindfulness, if you look at the Eightfold Path, it is not just mindfulness per se, it is always, it is put within the section on concentration, right? So you have the right concentration, you also have effort, the atapi part. But even mindfulness itself must be linked back to right understanding. There's the sampajana, isn't it? The clear knowing. So you see, it's so important that we must always look at it in the context of the Eightfold Path. And a very good discourse where you can actually get details about what each of these means is the Majjhima Sutta, the Great 40. Right? This is in Majjhima Nikaya 117. So I just leave this source with you so that you can make your own further studies here. So my point at this stage is just to let you know that while we practice or we observe the precepts of non-killing, non-stealing, and sexual and observance of non-sexual misconduct, we must always do it with right view. Okay, so that's a very important part. Okay, so why? Just a little bit elaboration here. We practice right action not because we want to avoid breaking the 5 precepts or because we fear that someone will punish us if we do so. So that should not really be the reason why we observe 5 precepts. If someone asks you, why do you observe the 5 precepts? Oh, I don't know. I just think that I should avoid it. Or because if I break the precept, someone's going to punish me. Or because the Buddha is going to get angry with me. So as you know, in Buddhism, the precepts are not commandments. There's no divine being up there that's going to punish you. If there's any punishment, you're punished by your own actions. Yeah? So when you have right view, then you know we avoid cruel and harmful behavior. Isn't that what the killing and stealing and subsequently the third precept is all about? They're cruel, they're harmful, as later we will see, because we see the consequences of such action. That's a very important part. I've purposely underlined it in red because right view or right understanding is having that view, having that understanding that whatever we do, our actions have consequences. Our actions have consequences. And because we understand the law of karma, we understand that consequences have actions. So good actions will lead to profound happiness for us and others now and in the future. And likewise, negative actions, say of a asappurisa, will lead to suffering, will lead to misery, not just for you, but for others, not only now, but in the future. All right? So we practice right action because we want our lives to be helpful and harmonious and peaceful, not destructive. So it is based on that understanding. Yeah. So each time when we observe the precepts, we should have at the back of our mind this knowledge or this understanding that yes, good actions will lead to bad results. So we avoid killing because killing is a harmful action or harming others is harmful, so we will not do it. So that is based on understanding. So we call it skillful because through abstaining from killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct, or as I said, if you prefer the translation as sexual misconduct, that's fine. They are found in the precepts, but the meaning in the Eightfold Path is slightly different, as I mentioned just now. So this is where we introduce these two terms. If you are, for those of you who are quite familiar with Buddhist philosophy, when we talk about sila, when we talk about precepts or ethics and morality, we actually divide morality into 2 types of morality, right? They are known by their Pali terms. One is called varita sila, and the other is charita sila. Okay, so as far as precepts are concerned, their meaning and purpose is just about not to break them, isn't it? You look at the 5 precepts, it's basically telling you what not to do, what not to do, basically what not to do. It seems to be silent on what you should do. But actually, it's not silent because you should always look at the precepts in terms of the overall Buddhist teachings, which is encapsulated in the Eightfold Path, right? So while in the Eightfold Path, the emphasis is more on the higher ethical behavior. So precepts are important. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that now because of this you throw away the precepts. Precepts are important because it tells you, first of all, what we should not do. Then it tells us what we should do, right? If you remember that famous saying in the Dhammapada, avoid evil, do good, purify the mind, isn't it? All 3 must be there. It's not good enough if you just avoid evil, right? Then you're only doing 30%. Then you're 30% sappurisa, right? Okay, so you should, yeah, that's just 1/3 of it. So you should avoid evil, should do good, and then you should purify the mind. So even doing good is good, but it's still not good enough. We have to purify the mind, right? That's where you have you have the sila, samadhi, and anya. So you see, everything in the Buddha's teachings is very consistent, and they are actually all integrated. They're all integrated, right? So when we, for example, the past few couple of weeks, you've been studying this discourse, called the discourse on the lesser discourse on full moon night. You find that whatever is explained in the Cula-punnama Sutta, for example, is repeated in many other suttas. Here you find the 5 precepts, isn't it? Are the 5 precepts only mentioned here? No. You read the Dikajanu Sutta, Buddha talks about the 5 precepts. You read the Abhisanda Sutta, Buddha also talks about 5 precepts. You read the Dhammika Sutta, also the 5 precepts. So you can see the consistency in the Buddha's teaching. So it is very important for us to read and to study the suttas, because by so doing, it not only enhances our knowledge and understanding, it actually creates that faith, confidence. What we are studying is actually consistently taught by the Buddha. So I think that's the very important here. Huh? So there are 2 things. Of course, this is just been technical, right? There's 2 types of sila. One is called varita, and the other is called charita. Okay. Now, what is this varita sila? So examples, precepts. So the one on the left and the one on the right. So if you look at the precepts, right, it's basically telling you abstention from killing living beings, abstention from stealing, abstention from sensual misconduct or sexual misconduct. And then there's always the positive expressions of the precepts. There's a positive expressions of the precepts. So the precepts, I would like to use the word a negative expression. A negative here doesn't mean bad. Negative here doesn't mean no good. It simply means the what you should not do aspects, right? So there's a negative in that sense, not negative in the sense of being bad, yeah. Negative in the sense of what you should not do. Then the positive expressions, when you abstain from killing living beings, instead you cultivate virtues. All right, so this is the charita sila. You cultivate kindness and compassion. All right, so that's something that we do in our everyday life, isn't it? All right, we not only abstain from harming living beings. Of course, maybe you don't go around killing living beings. Right? I'm sure we don't do that. But the more important is, do we also express in our daily life kindness and compassion to others? Okay, so likewise, abstention from stealing. We talk about generosity and renunciation. Abstention from sexual misconduct. We talk about contentment and respect for faithfulness or integrity or fidelity. So this, now, unfortunately, I would not have time to go into details. Now, you notice that last week we spent one whole session just talking about right speech, right? So you see, speech is also a very important part, yeah. But anyway, and the right action, the Buddha has lumped all these 3 together. So each one of them are equally important. Because we don't have time to go into details, I would recommend you a very good text if you're interested to study more. Some of you may be aware of this book. It's not a very thick book. It's a little paperback. It's called The 5 Precepts and the 5 Ennoblers. Have you? I'm not sure. Maybe in Nalanda library you have that. Of course, now it's not possible for you to go to the library to read, right? So it's a wonderful book, but unfortunately, I think that book is no longer in print. That was one of my first books that I came across. The title is the five Precepts and 5 Ennoblers. So in Pali, it's called Panchasila Panchadhamma. Panchasila Panchadhamma. If you can, well, you can Google it, but I don't think you can find that book. You can't buy it from Amazon. It was published by Mahamakut many years ago, but it's out of print. It's written by actually a son of King Mongkut, Venerable Vajiranyana Varora Rasa, who was at that time the Supreme Patriarch, the Sankharaja. So it's a very authoritative book, and there you'll find all the details about what actually it means. So that book is highly recommended. Okay? Now, I'm not going to go into details. I think many of you are familiar now. I'm not very clear if these are actually from the suttas, but it's definitely from the Atthakatha. Atthakatha would be the commentaries. So in case you're wondering where this comes from. So it talks about the factors of killing. So first, for killing to take place, there must be a living being, right? And in Buddhism, we define a living being as a psychophysical life, nama and rupa. It has got a mind, and it has got matter. Okay? So there's a living being, right? And then you know that that is a living being. So there's a knowledge of the living being. And then you have the intention to kill that living being. And then the act of killing takes place. And then the being dies. So you see, it becomes very technical, right? So it's typical of, for example, the commentaries, they tend to put things in little boxes, like in the Abhidhamma, things are very exact. As I said, 7 universal, 6 particulars, you can run away from it. So likewise, in this commentary, it said the factors of killing, you must have this 5. So which means that technically, if there's a living being, you know it's a living being, you intend to kill the living being, you try to kill the living being, but the being does not die. So technically, you have not broken the precept by definition. But is that a good action? That's not a good action, right? I remember this was one of the first lessons which I learned when I wanted to know more about Buddhism. My first teacher, Longpo Dhamma Chandwood, he told me, and I always remember that he said, yeah, you may not have broken the precept, but you have broken the Dhamma. The moment you have that knowledge, you have the intention to harm someone, irrespective of whether that person dies because of your action or not, So technically, you may not have broken that precept by definition, but you have really broken you've broken the Dharma. Right? Okay, so I think that's a very important part. And later on, I'll try to explain why you have to look at the precepts in a much wider perspective. Right? But I just highlight this because some of you may raise that questions as other people have raised. So I thought I'd just let you know that this is what is mentioned in the Atthakatha, in the commentaries. Right? So if we move on, the intention is very important. Right? So in Buddhism, the intention or the chaitana, right? And what is karma? Right? I think I mentioned to you previously that in the Vedika Sutta, the Buddha makes it very clear that once we have the intention to harm someone, karma already created. Okay? So the violation of the precept arises in the mind and with the recognition of a living being and the willful thought of killing that living being. Also, ordering someone else to do the actual killing does not mitigate responsibility for it. However, a killing that is premeditated is a graver offense than a killing that is impulsive, such as self-defense. So the karma that is created will be different, right? And it is very difficult for us to compartmentalize and say, oh, if you do this, this is your karma. You do that, that is your karma. Because karma is one of those things that is, the Buddha says that in the Achintayani Sutta, the Buddha says there are 4 things that you can go crazy. And trying to understand how karma actually works, you can go crazy. Because it's only that of a mind of a Buddha who actually fully comprehend how karma works. Having said that, what we do understand is that karma operates in the moral sphere. So any wholesome actions will lead to wholesome results, and unwholesome actions lead to unwholesome results. When it ripens, it's very difficult for us to understand. If you're familiar with the twin discourses, the twin suttas in the Buddha's teachings in the Majjhima Nikaya, called the lesser discourse on karma and the greater discourse on karma. So those 2 discourses explains to you why karma is not easily explained or easily understood just by an ordinary layperson. Right? But details are actually explained in both the discourse, the Cula-punnama Sutta and the Mahakamma Sutta. So details are explained there. Again, I'm just showing you the name of those discourses so that you could do further research to that. So what is important then when we look at precepts is not to be too technical and say, well, if I harm that creature, but I harm it in such a extent that the creature doesn't die, or that the insect or the animal, I harm it, but I don't eat it. Because If the animal doesn't die, I didn't break the first precept, according to the Atakata, you know. But you should not have that attitude. Huh? Your attitude should be any physical action that harms another person is wrong, even if no one is killed. Right? Okay, so that's the reason why I highlighted that, but also I want to emphasize the importance of the intentions of the mind. Now, abstaining from killing reaches its highest meaning when we develop a completely non-harming attitude and continually wish for the well-being of other living beings with love and compassion. Now, what this means is that now we become aware of the Four Noble Truths. What is the Four Noble Truths? Aware of the suffering caused by the destruction of life, right? So then you make the commitment to cultivate compassion and how to protect the lives of not just humans, but also animals. And if you take it to a wider extent, protecting even the environment, right? In today's context, right? Protecting the environment. When you harm the environment, are you not harming future generations? You're actually harming your grandchildren, actually, isn't it so? Right? So that's the importance. That's why climate change, even though one former US president said it's fake news, right? But we all know how true it is, isn't it? Right? And yeah, just as a digression, on December 18, all right, and 19, the Malaysian Buddhist Tibetan Cultural Center and the Islamic IKIM, right? No, ISTEC, sorry. The Islamic group will be organizing a conference on the Buddhist and Islamic approach to climate change. Right? So His Holiness the Dalai Lama will be one of the keynote speakers, and we have speakers like Venerable Bhikkhuni Dhammananda, who has done extensive work on Buddhist perception of nature, protecting nature, and so on. So harming the environment itself is also a form of healing if you take it to a very broad extent of this. Of course, during the Buddha's time, the concept of harming the environment may not have been there. But today, when we look at it, we can actually expand this harming. So we are not harming only animals and human beings, we are also harming the environment. So because of that, we make a determination not to kill, not to let others kill, and not also to support any act of killing in your thoughts and in your way of life. So we make it as our way of life. Why? Because of our right view, because of understanding that harmful actions derive from anger, fear, greed, intolerance. All this is what causes us to harm, isn't it? It's either from greed or from anger, it could be from fear, it could be from intolerance, right? And we harm sometimes not only human beings, we harm animals, right, based on wrong views. Every year you read about in Nepal, they have an annual festival where hundreds, if not thousands, of animals or cows are just slaughtered because of that view. Okay, so animals are also living beings. I remember there's a very beautiful book. I'm not sure some of you are aware. It's actually called Kinship with All Life. Kinship, if those of you who are interested, especially those who are animal lovers, you can Google this title. It's still available. It's called Kinship with All Life by J. Allen Boone. I remember that name, J. Allen Boone. It's a real life example of how animals actually can communicate with one another and with people who understand them. So in that book, J. Allen Boone talks about how he was even able to communicate with flies. And each time when he set his mind to communicate with a fly would just land on his hand. Now, I'm not sure whether it's the same fly each time it's on his hand, right? But in others we can communicate. And when I was a young boy, I remember watching the movie called Dr. Dolittle, right, in the 70s. Of course, many of you were not even born and were not even born yet. So there was this musical. Actually, it was a musical, Dr. Dolittle. But I heard that last year they came up with a new version of Dr. Dolittle. starring this guy, what was the guy, the one who acted in Iron Man, but apparently the movie didn't become as successful as the musical in the mid-60s. So the concept of Dr. Dolittle, right, is that one could communicate with animals. Okay. So killing and related acts, I'll just go very quickly. The directly involved in killing, encourage others to kill, praise the act of killing, rejoice at witnessing killing. You see people killing, you rejoice. You kill through incantation during the Buddha's time, maybe even now. Apparently you have some psychic powers, you're able to cause harm to someone. So but the seriousness of killing depends on the size, intelligence, benefits done, and the spiritual attainment of that living being. For example, it is said that if you harm a very harmless spiritual being, and then you kill someone in self-defense, right? Both are killing, but the karma that you create will be very different. Okay, and also it is said if you kill an ant and you kill a human being, the karma created is also different. Now, it does not mean that then it's okay for you to go around killing ants. It doesn't mean that. It simply means that the intensity or the weightage of the karmic effects will be different, right? Why? Because to kill an ant, how much scheming, how much cunning thoughts, how much planning do you need to do compared to killing a human being? So the more of those negative thoughts you have in your mind, obviously, the more karma you create, right? I'm sure you don't spend days and nights trying to see how you're going to kill an ant. But you kill an ant, that's still killing. But to harm or kill a human being, you need a lot of planning. Not so easy to kill a human being. So that's the reason why it's being used. Now, I just touched a little bit on vegetarianism. Although vegetarianism is encouraged in Buddhism, it is considered a personal choice, not a requirement. Why? Historical Buddha was not a vegetarian. Historical Buddha means Shakyamuni Buddha. The first monks obtained all their food from alms round. The Buddha taught his monks to eat whatever food they were given, including meat. If the householder were to offer meat, they would just take. Today, monastics in the Chinese Mahayana tradition are strictly vegetarians, while those in Theravada and Vajrayana are not necessarily so. When I use the word not necessarily so, it does not mean that they are not vegetarians. Some of them have also chosen to be vegetarians. Okay? But their Vinaya does not specifically say that they must be vegetarians. But in the Chinese Mahayana tradition, it is a requirement for them to be vegetarian. So again, I'm not going to go into detail, but just some information. Now, in the Pali tradition, in the Jivaka Sutta, in case someone asks why is it that Theravada monks are not vegetarians, so here in this discourse, the Buddha mentioned 3 instances whereby meat should not be eaten. When it is seen, heard, or suspected that the living being has been killed for the monk. So if the bhikkhu, so if say tomorrow you're going to offer dana to a bhante, to a particular venerable, and you go up to the venerable and say, "Oh, venerable sir, tomorrow I'm going to the fresh market. I'm going to buy this fat chicken, and I'm going to cook curry chicken for you." Right? If he knows, he suspects that you kill this chicken specifically for him, then he's not supposed to partake of that food. There are 3 instances whereby meat may be eaten when it is not seen, not heard, and not suspected. For example, when the monks go on alms round, the monks don't go around asking, "Hey, did you cook this specially for me?" Right? Whatever you cook, whatever you offer to the monks just accept. So that's the spirit. So if you are interested to know where it comes from, we'll give you that source. Now, I'll just move on quickly to the other 2. The other 2, again, I'm not going into details. I'm more interested to explain the overall concept, right? The idea behind it, right? So what is stealing? So, right, this is adina dana, adina dana veramani sikha padang samadhiyami. So this means appropriating the rightful belongings of others with thievish intent. If one takes something that has no owner, such as unclaimed stones, wood, or even gems extracted from the earth, this is not a violation, even though these objects have not been given. All right, underhand dealings, fraud, cheating, forgery, corruption. So all these are included in this precept, stealing. Okay. So factors of stealing, again, this is from the Atthakatha. So the property must be in the possession of another person. There must be the knowledge that the property is in the possession of that person. there must be the intention. So you see, the key is the intention. Intention is very important. There must be an act done to steal. By that act, the property must have been taken. Now, let's say you wanted to take something, somebody's pen, for example. Possession of is a very expensive pen, maybe a Mont Blanc pen. Then you know that this belongs to someone. You have the intention to steal, and then you try to take. But before you could get hold of that pen, the owner walked into the room. So you leave your hand away. So technically, you have not broken the precept of stealing because that property was not taken. You see? So that's what I mean. You must not take it literally. You must not take the precept literally. All right? You must take it in this broader perspective. All right? Broader perspective is you already have the intention to steal. All right? So even though in the end you could not take it because somebody appears there, but the act, that is already considered an unwholesome action. Right? Okay, so that's the effect. So again, I have to show you this because this is mentioned in the kata. Right? So weightage of stealing, again, the value of object taken, moral weight is directly proportional to the value of the object. Right? You try to steal something that belongs to the chief abbot of a temple, right? And then you go and steal something from a thief, right? It's still stealing, but the karma is different. Qualities of the victim of the thief varies according to the moral quality of the victim and subjective state of the thief. Acts of theft may be motivated either by greed or hatred. Now, somehow in the Buddhist teachings, of course, all these three are greed, hatred, delusion. They are called the three unwholesome roots of evil. Right? But compared between greed and hatred, somehow Buddhist teachers tend to give greater emphasis on the propensity of hatred, right? Like even in the Mahayana tradition, if you have read the Bodhicattva, Shantideva says, if you don't have patience, just because of the anger, that moment of anger would wipe out all the good deeds that you have done for many, many past lives. So that is just to emphasize the intensity, the propensity of hatred. Okay, that doesn't mean that it's okay to have greed. Right? It simply means that proportionately, right? Greed, hatred, and delusion. So, what is the positive counterpart? Well, we talk about honesty, we talk about contentment, and we talk about generosity. So, again, in the overall perspective, when you look at the precept on adina, dana, viramadhi, sikappada, you're aware of the suffering caused by, for example, exploitation, stealing. It could be social injustice, oppression. So you're committed to practice generosity in your thinking, in your speaking, and in your acting. Right? So you always look at the charita sila. Remember the earlier slides about the varita sila, what not to do? You must always balance it with the charita sila, in other words, the positive aspect. Okay? So the precepts is actually like a friend to us when we ask, are you sure you want to do this? So it's like a gentle reminder, right? That look, hey, use this opportunity to cultivate clear awareness, right, of your craving, or of the greed that's behind that action. So the third precept, I'll go through quickly. The third precept, to avoid sexual activity that is exploitative or hurts others. So this is part of the Buddha's advice not to cause suffering to others. And the gravity of breaking the precept depends on the degree of lust motivating the action. And it could also be hatred, because, for example, rape, is a form based on, it could be lust, it could also be on hatred, like in wars, right? You find that in wars, many of the situations where rape is committed is of hatred for a particular race or particular community, right? And the degrees and the qualities of the persons against whom the transgression is. Likewise, in the Atthakatha, they are very precise. It talks about it must be a man, a woman with whom it is improper to have sexual intercourse. Yeah, it must be intention to have you have the intention of sexual intercourse, the act of intercourse, the enjoyment of the contact of the organs. Right. So again, the act means the intention. Right. So all these things are couched in the same as killing and stealing in the Atthakatha. And then in the commentaries and also, I think this is also mentioned in suttas, those what they call forbidden women, women under guardianship of parents, family members, or relatives, married or betrothed women, bhikkhunis and religious women, or unwilling partner who is drug or forced to sexual intercourse under threat of violence or coercion. So here you find that even during the Buddha's time, things were very detailed, set up in detail, right, about the people not to transgress. Now, what is important is that when we observe precepts, to observe the precepts and act harmoniously so that no one provokes you. Okay? So like the third precept, for example. So more important, again, we link it back to the Four Noble Truths about dukkha, suffering. So Thich Nhat Hanh actually translates the third precept as true love. Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese Zen master, he uses it, true love. And it's based on the premise that because you're aware of the suffering caused by sexual misconduct, isn't it? Can you imagine, because of that action, families are broken, divorce takes place, and the children goes without both parents. So then you're committed to cultivating responsibility and learning ways to protect the safety and integrity of individuals, couples, families, and by so doing, you protect society. You see? So we make sure then that our sexual desires do not harm ourselves and others. And we learn to take care of our sexual energies, right? Like Gandhi. Gandhi says, the lower part of us is just like an animal. You know Gandhi, the great Indian teacher of non-violence. He says the lower part of us humans, even though we are humans, the lower part of us is actually very animalistic. Okay, so we do everything, even we protect children from sexual abuse and to prevent couples and family from being broken by sexual misconduct. So that is only possible if we have mindful action, isn't it? Mindfulness and then the right effort. Okay. So finally, last week I also introduced to you the Ambalatika Rahulovada Sutta, which is a discourse the Buddha gave to his son Rahula. And I think this is a very good advice for us to reflect. Of course, here it refers to mental. I think last week I was talking about verbal. So today we talk about, we reject. So we ask in future, will our bodily action cause harm to ourselves and to others? If that action that we're going to do, whether it's killing or harming or sexual misconduct, if it's going to cause harm to yourself and others, don't do it. If it doesn't cause harm, if the action of yours doesn't cause harm, continue. Then you are a sappurisa. Then you assess, if you're in the midst of doing it, is this bodily action that you're doing, is it harmful to you? Is it harmful to others? If yes, please stop doing it. If no, continue. And then you reflect. Buddhist teaching is always about trying to reflect. That's why it's a past tense. Did this bodily action, did it cause harm to yourself? Did it cause harm to others? If yes, don't do it again. It has been done. Fine, it's been done. Right? You know it's a wrong action. Don't do it again. If no, that is a wise action. Continue. Right? Then you are sappurisa. Then you continue. So the Buddha gave actually a lot of advice, a lot of instruction. So the Ambalatika Rahulovada Sutta is also a very good discourse. So each time before we do something, we want to say something, we ask ourselves, what is the repercussion of that action of ours to be able to do it? Right? If we are already doing it, we should always be mindful to tell ourselves, should I continue? Should I stop? Should I not continue? You have already done it. It's always good for us to reflect. Yeah, I did this yesterday. As I said, it's always very good before we go to bed. We spend a few moments, if we can, just to reflect. What did we do this waking, during our waking hours the whole day? We did something bad. We did something unwholesome. Okay, we have done it. Doesn't matter. We make a strong determination. We will not do it again. We learn from the mistakes that we did, and we realize we have done something good. Very good. We continue. Right? So the Ambalatika Rahulovada Sutta is a very simple guide, but of course it requires training, isn't it? We have to train our mind. So that's where mindfulness training. Okay. So conclusion: always check our thoughts, our words, and our actions. In all our actions, we should reflect on whether our intentions are beneficial to ourselves and to others. In this way, we will check ourselves before we act. Right? So we make it a habit, and it is not that difficult, I can assure you, because if we make it a habit, then we develop what is called habitual karma or habitual tendencies. In Pali, it's called anusayas. So if you do it often enough, then you develop that tendencies, and that anusayas will just stay with you. It becomes second nature to you. So if we put other sentient beings before ourselves, those selfish feelings will not arise. Okay? So I think let me conclude by expressing these thoughts of loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. So let us reflect. May all sentient beings have happiness and its causes. May all sentient beings be free of suffering and its causes. May all sentient beings never be separated from happiness, and may they always be without suffering. And may all sentient beings always abide in equanimity, free of bias, free of attachment, free of anger. So let us encapsulate all these four sublime states in ourselves. Let us also express these thoughts, this in our mind, in our speech, and in our actions. Okay? Thank you very much. So if there are any questions, I'll be happy to respond. And if there's anything that I've said for the past 45 minutes or so, if they've been helpful, please keep it with it and practice it. If not useful, please leave it behind. Thank you.